Well, hello, Canadian Campaholic here with a quick tip video. It is now coming up to the end of June, and we're on a little bit of a hiatus from camping trips. We've got about 3 weeks between trips. When you have a hiatus like that in the camping season, there isn't really a heck of a lot that you need to do in terms of maintenance with your travel trailer. As we store ours in a storage facility, I am inclined to come over at least once a week just to check on the general condition, make sure there's no damage, make sure the tires are good, make sure that no wasps or any other critters have made any nests. But above and beyond that, there's just a couple of other things that we're going to check on today. One thing we'll speak about is the battery and battery disconnects and why you want to do that. We're also going to talk about the water system, specifically the low point drains and the hot water tank. So let's hop out of the van, let's take a look at the trailer, let's talk about those maintenance items. So like I said, it's been about a week now since we finished our last camping trip, and we've probably got another 2 weeks before we're camping again. One of the key things that I do when I know the trailer's going to be stored for anything over a week is I disconnect the negative cable of the battery. Now, some higher end trailers will have a battery disconnect switch inside the camper. Ours does not feature this, and I will literally take this cover off. You can just take that little safety strap off, remove the cover, and then I just use a small pair of adjustable pliers and I disconnect the negative terminal. I will then just tuck it into the battery box away from anything that it can make contact with, and secure the box back up. Now, the reason that you do this is to prevent things in the trailer from accidentally or inadvertently draining your battery. So let's talk about what those would be. All right, sorry about the lighting, because I have the battery disconnected and it's a gray day. The lighting's not the best in here, but even though you may have your battery disconnected, there are items within your trailer that some people will call them power vampires that will very slowly draw battery power. One of them is your stereo system. So our trailer comes with a DVD, CD, radio, MP3 player, Bluetooth and everything, and that sends music and sound to the inside speakers, and we've also got some speakers on the outside of the trailer. When the battery is connected, this LCD screen displays the clock and the time. So even though it's powered off, there's a small amount of power going into the stereo. The other thing that sucks a little bit of power, and again, I apologize for the crappy lighting, but this, your carbon monoxide detector. This is hardwired into the trailer, and it will stay powered on even though you're not actually using the trailer. If the battery's connected and you don't have a battery disconnect, this will stay powered on. Sometimes smoke detectors will be in the same category. Now, ours actually has a battery in it, a 9-volt battery, so there's no concerns of it draining the main house battery, if you will. Our trailer features an 80 amp hour battery, and surprisingly, within a week of the trailer sitting here and not doing anything, if you were to come up to the battery level and actually push the battery level button, of course nothing's going to happen because the battery's disconnected, I've actually seen it, let's see if I can get it to focus, I've actually seen it drop by 1/3. So a little small trailer like this with the stereo and the carbon monoxide detector has been able to drain our 80 amp hour battery by about 1/3 every week. So if I know I'm going to be on a little bit of a hiatus for anything more than, say, 5 days, I actually disconnect the battery. And then it's just a matter of coming back either the day that you're leaving or the day before, and then you reconnect the battery. Now, there are tools and devices, there's aftermarket parts that you can install to disconnect the battery and make it easier. For me, you know, it's not too tedious, so I do it the old-fashioned way. But that's one key piece of maintenance when your trailer is going to be sitting for a prolonged period. The other item that I'm going to talk about that's kind of important as it relates to leaving your RV sitting for a little while in the summer months is the water system. Our trailer has a, I think it's a 6-gallon, it's between 6 and 8 gallons. It is a Suburban hot water heater, and it's a direct spark ignition hot water heater. I noticed that after a couple of camping trips where we had been using the trailer, the water that was coming out of the water heater was starting to smell a little bit. It smelled a little bit like rotten eggs. It was a bit cloudy, and to be honest, didn't taste that great. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me that we don't really use the shower a lot, other than doing dishes and maybe filling up the kettle. We're not necessarily using all of that hot water, and it's amazing how long the water will stay hot in the tank even though it's not actually operating. If that sits in there and is boiled again and again and again, the quality of the water is going to drastically drop. So one of the tips that I found online was to actually make sure that you drain down your water heater. Now, if you're going to camp every week, it's probably not necessary, or if you're replenishing the supply, it's not necessary. But if you're like us, weekend warriors, and you're going to have a decent gap in time, you should drain it down. So we're going to do that in a second. The other thing that I will do from time to time, and there's debate on this, is I will empty the low point drains, and that will drain a bulk of the water supply out of the system. Now, we always drain our freshwater tank. You should always do that. If you're leaving the campsite and you don't plan to use the trailer again, don't leave that water sitting in the tank. Drain it down. Make sure you close the valve. But there's different schools of thought on the low point drain. And the reason that some people feel you should do this is, again, so the water isn't nasty and disgusting inside the pipes. There's also a sanitary concern, and we'll talk about how to sanitize your freshwater system in another video. Some people say it's not necessary. Some people say if the pipes are full of water, you're going to have less chances of mold developing. Other people will say that there's a greater chance of mold developing. So let me know what you tend to do in the comments below. Do you drain your low point drains, or do you leave them? In our trailer, being that it's so small, it doesn't take long to drain them down, and there's really not a lot of plumbing. So today we'll drain the low point drains. So let's do that. Okay, so the water heater on our trailer is a Suburban hot water heater. I do not know anything about Atwood heaters, so if that's the kind of heater you have in your trailer, I'm afraid you're going to have to do some research online. But we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to twist this tab here, and that will allow the door of the hot water tank to open. And we're going to need to use it's a pretty monstrous socket, a 1 1/16 socket. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove, some people call it the drain plug, it's actually the anode rod, and that will enable us to drain the tank. Now, you don't ever want to do this if the tank has been in use recently and is hot. You could burn yourself. Either way, you should just very carefully, I don't know why my phone's having such trouble focusing today, release any excess pressure from the pressure release valve up here, and you just lift this tab up. You see a little bit of water drained out. So now there's no pressure, there's no risk of the anode rod flying out at you, but we're literally going to put the socket on there. It shouldn't be in there too tight. You never want to over tighten it because you could pull the threads of the tank. You just want it to be snug so it doesn't leak. You'll notice I've got some Teflon tape on there. Alright, so we're going to put the socket on the end of the anode rod and just give it a little bit of a twist. Okay, so we're just giving it a little bit of a twist. It was a little stiff. And once you've got it loosened off, you should be able to remove it by hand. Get your tool out of the way though, because a fair amount of water is going to start coming out of here. There you go. I'm just going to let that drain out. While you're at it, this is a good time, if it's a Suburban hot water heater, to inspect your anode rod. This is a sacrificial rod that is designed to corrode so that your tank doesn't corrode. I don't believe Atwood heaters have these. You can see we've got a fair amount of corrosion at the base. And again, I apologize for my phone. I don't know what's going on with the focus today. This rod's actually in pretty good shape. If the whole thing was as pitted as that end area there, then you would definitely want to look at replacing it. One of the things I'm going to look into is looking online to see what Suburban recommends in terms of diameter or leftover material before you replace it. Always make sure you've got a little bit of Teflon tape, a little bit of plumber's Teflon tape there on the end of the anode rod, and that's just to make sure that you don't get any leaks. But yeah, remove this, let it drain down. The other thing with hot water heaters is you do get a certain amount of sediment in the bottom. You can buy wands online that will go up inside the tank, and with a hose you can spray that out. Some people recommend using a vinegar mixture. We're going to try that later in the season. While that is pouring out everywhere, I'm going to put the anode rod somewhere safe just for a moment. And we're going to take a look at the low point drains. This is not to be confused with the drain down plug on the actual freshwater tank. That's underneath, and you would open that when you're leaving the campsite and then make sure it's closed once you're fully drained down. But this is your hot water line, excuse me, and your cold water line low point drain. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, some people will say just leave it, doesn't make a difference. Other people will say yes, drain it down, helps keep the system clean and the water tasting better. Again, lots of debate on that. But it's a simple case of, and these are hand tightened, and I always turn them the wrong darn way. Just manually unscrew them. You could use a pair of pliers to gently get them started if they're a little stuck. Just take the caps off. Again, if you're going to do this right after you've used the trailer, be careful, because this one I'm about to take off is for the hot water, and that could scald you, but this trailer's been sitting for a week, so there's no risk of that. And we'll just let those drain down. Not a lot of water on this trailer. It's pretty small, it's only 22 feet, so we won't get too much coming out. And of course, this is fresh water, folks. There's no chemicals or contamination in this, so there's no harm to the environment. So while that's piddling away, the hot water tank's actually almost empty already. That's great. Other things I check for is I check the tire condition. You should always check your tire pressures on a regular basis. You should also check the torque specs on the lug nuts before every trip. And you'll have to check with the manufacturer to know exactly what those specs are. You should also take a quick boo in the furnace vents. Make sure that you don't have any wasps or critters making nests in there. It also pays to take a look along the inside of your awning. We recently had a wasp starting a nest up in the corner there. I also just do a quick walk around, check the general inspection, just make sure that, you know, there's no sign of any damage anywhere. Make sure the windows on the side of the trailer aren't cracked or damaged. Again, check the other wheel, make sure the chocks are still in place. If you saw my video on keeping mice out, I like to make sure that the piece of tape securing the shore power cord is good. Make sure nothing's bumped the sewer dump valves. And check the storage door. Make sure nobody's been messing around with it. It's locked, it's secure, it's good. Leveling jacks, of course, I keep them up. Some people like to put the leveling jacks down. I personally don't. If the trailer's going to sit here unattended for prolonged periods, I'll leave them up. And then, of course, it brings us back to the battery. Always check the interior of your trailer between trips as well. You know, look for any obvious leaks. Check for smells. We inspected the seal on the roof earlier in the season, and with a newer trailer like this, probably not likely to have issues inside. But all we'll do here in a moment is we will reinstall the anode rod. We'll gently screw the caps back on. We will lock the door, and we'll be on our way. All right, well, I think that'll about do it for today. Just a very quick tip video for you. I hope you guys are having a fabulous 2018 camping season. We've done a lot of trips so far, and we've got a really nice trip north of here coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm super excited for that. If you have any suggestions or recommendations for things that you do with your trailer for maintenance, go ahead and pop them in the comments below. If this is your first time watching my videos, please give this video a thumbs up, and please do subscribe. Happy camping.